Good morning. Please stand, join me for the first hymn, Wake Now, My Senses, number 298. We're going to do verses 1, 3, and 5. Wake now, my senses, and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow, giving, receiving, as love shows us how. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the
Good morning. Welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal, religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we like to say in short, to create community, find meaning, and live justly. We want to begin, as usual, by welcoming all of you to this space. Your uniqueness, your unique beliefs and background and lifestyle and experiences and differences, and all that helps make you who you are is welcome here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane. And this includes those of you who are in the room with us this morning here in Spokane, as well as the many of you who are live streaming with us this morning. We're always so grateful to have you. And first service, we also have the added benefit of having some friends on Zoom join us. So I'm going to go to them now and say, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, I think we're doing fine, Todd. We've got a special guest that you might know, too, down there on the bottom.
I do see that. That looks like... Oh, she's showing her face. Oh, everybody's waving. You probably can't see them, but there's actually a huge crowd in here behind the front rows. So pretty good group here this morning in person, too. Yes, Peggy, folks are always asking about you, and I have to explain. Peggy is a school teacher, although she's not been in a classroom for many years. She's in a classroom now, and she's catching everything she missed for the last probably 7 or 8 years. So she just keeps staying home, so she doesn't pass along the joy. But glad to see you online, Peg. And good to see all of you, too. Thanks so much for being here from around various parts of the countries. We're always glad to have you, and great to see your faces. And I know our friends here in the sanctuary can see you, but you can't see them as well. And they always greet you with a wave and a smile, too. So great to have all of you here.
And Todd, if you wish to join us for coffee afterwards, one day or occasionally, you'd be more than welcome.
I would love to do that. I'll try to do that. After services, I tend to get caught up in conversations, and that prevents me from doing it, although my intention is often to do so. I'll try to do that today. I'll try to be rude to some of the folks here so I can be polite to you. How's that?
Well, sounds good. We sometimes get caught up in conversations after the service, too. So.
Yeah, I get it. Well, absolutely. Love having you here, and I will try to join you soon. So this is the time of the year that we engage in our annual generosity campaign in which we ask our friends and members to contribute to our congregation, primarily so that we can get through another year, but also because it helps us budget properly to know and to be able to anticipate what we're going to have so that we can budget accordingly. And that doesn't sound real sexy, I know, but I'm going to actually ask Lynn Janishian and Kelsey Christensen to come forward now, and they're going to talk more about the generosity campaign. And I didn't want to steal your thunder, so I'm going to let you guys really. You're way more sexy. Get the crowd going here. So.
Good morning. This is the end of week one of our pledge campaign, or generosity campaign, and it's Nourishing Day for our theme of Nourishing Liberal Religious Home. So I'm going to update you where we are in our fundraising or our pledge raising, and then Kelsey's going to talk for a couple of minutes about what the word nourishing means for her. So far, we have 28 pledging units from all around the country and in Canada. We have some in Texas, Delaware, and there's one other state farther east. Can't remember which one. Most of the pledging units so far are from Spokane, as you can imagine. We typically have around 160 pledging units. So we only have 28 that have come in thus far, or this was by Friday at noon. And we have raised, so the good news is, thus far, $101,980. You can see that on our little thermometer there. So we're about a third of the way there. Keep getting those pledges coming, and your name will be entered in a little drawing. So I'll invite Kelsey in.
Good morning. My name is Kelsey Christensen, and my husband and I have been members at UUCS for about a dozen years. However, my journey being nourished by this congregation started years earlier. My Grandpa Dick and Grandma Donna Borden Rhodes started bringing me to wonderful Wednesdays way back when I was in elementary school. I remember having dinner, doing crafts and playing games, singing songs, and meeting not only people my age, but also the friends of my grandparents. I wasn't thinking too seriously about the church component, but I knew that I was welcomed wholeheartedly and encouraged to be just who I was. What an incredible feeling as a young person. Fast forward to my high school years, and Grandma Donna called me up and asked if I wanted to join the Solstice Choir at the church. And I didn't know much about it, but I love to sing, and I love hanging out with my grandma, so why not? Years of singing with the Solstice Choir eventually led to joining the regular Sunday choir. And music has always been one of the major ways to feed my soul, and I hope that the choir and all of the incredible music here touches your life as well. My husband Billy and I started thinking about committing to the church as we were becoming parents and deciding what messages we wanted our children to hear as they grow. We loved the interfaith component, and that on any given Sunday, we would hear wisdom from different faith traditions woven together. The intergenerational relationships from my childhood were still present and are such a valuable part of how our church operates. Our church community celebrated all 5 of our adoptions with us and have continued to nurture all of our kids and welcome the noise that they bring with them to second service. And just a special shout out to everyone who volunteers their time and their resources to help support the RE program. And then blessedly, every Sunday that we're here, my husband and I have about 20 whole minutes where we can sit side by side and just exist. It might sound like it's a small thing, but it does so much for my heart and for my state of being here. I have so much gratitude for this congregation and all the different ways that it nourishes people. Whether it's the sermons, the music, religious education, and our whole lives, a cup of coffee during social hour, or the variety of groups caring for each other, caring for our church, and for our wider community, I hope that this space and this community nourishes you in so many ways. So thank you for caring for me, for nurturing my family and the others in our beautiful congregation. Please join me by pledging to support this church so that it can continue to nourish our community in so many vital ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. So I told you that was going to be much better. So let's take a moment, speaking of nourishing one another, having those few seconds to greet one another at the start of our service, whether you're here in person or online, is an important part of, I think, that sense of community that sustains us all. So take a few minutes here, a couple of minutes to greet one another this morning.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Never know when you're going to
That's right.
seize up, on the speaker. See the smiles, eye contact. All right. Would you guys stop nourishing each other for a few minutes, please? Actually, that was great. I really hated to interrupt you this morning. I was looking out and everybody was so happy to see each other and lots of conversation going on. So more opportunity to do that between services, but we are going to move forward now, as usual, by lighting our chalice, which is the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Like many of you in this audience, my path to Unitarianism has been rather long. I'm writing a memoir, and my religious evolution from Presbyterianism to this church is one theme. My memory is assisted by a trove of letters written during my family's globe-trotting Foreign Service life when we were often separated. In one, written from Stanford to my family in Germany, I described my shock as a college freshman to learn in my Western civilization and Christian ethics classes about Christianity's borrowings from other religions, facts I'd never learned in years of Sunday school. I keep thinking about the myth of Christmas, I wrote, opposed to the cold, hard facts that December 25th was a pagan holiday to worship the winter equinox, that the Zoroastrians invented the Messiah, that Mary stemmed from the Egyptian cult of Isis. It changes your outlook on things, and it is rather disconcerting at first. That was my 18-year-old self talking. There were inspiring Christian ministers on my campus, such as Robert McAfee Brown, a leader in the 1960s civil rights movement, but I started to notice the presence of Unitarians in the dangerous voter registration efforts in the Deep South and in the growing anti-Vietnam War movement, especially the courageous UU decision to publish the Pentagon Papers, The Secret History of the Vietnam War. After college, I protested against the war in Boston in marches organized by UUs. I stuck with the Presbyterians for a while when I moved to Spokane in the late 60s, launching a journalism career after graduate school at Berkeley. But I was put off by the Spokane church's conservatism. And my break with that church came in the early 80s after I reported on a local utility company's CEO's involvement in an elaborate money laundering scheme to bribe state legislatures. He was on the church board, and the members gave him a pass under the doctrine of the elect, the Calvinist belief that powerful people have an inside track to heaven. He was forced to resign his high-profile job, and I no longer felt welcome in that church. I soon migrated to the Unitarians on the South Hill, where a former research chemist, the Reverend Dr. William Harper Houff, provided inspiring leadership. He stood out, challenging the power structure, including the perpetrators of the nuclear arms race. His 1984 sermon, Silent Holocaust, was a call to action against nuclear weapons. It sparked the creation of HEAL, the Hanford Education Action League, a group that did a deep dive into Hanford's history of nuclear secrecy. As a reporter, I couldn't join that activist group, but it did give me an early framework for my own Hanford investigations into the secret radiation contamination of Eastern Washington. The work that Reverend Eckloff has done with us far more recently on marriage equality, climate change, and growing illiberalism in Unitarianism shows that we still stand out. I've been distressed by recent developments in our religion that devalue individualism, the written word, classical liberalism, and tolerance. But I'm still inspired by this congregation and still convinced that our theology is vital in a rapidly changing world.
Thank you. Please stand, join me for Filled with Loving Kindness, number 1031. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well.
We are now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. And I did not get any specific request this week, but we are going to, as we have been for some time, begin with a candle on behalf of the people of Ukraine and that part of the world that are being devastated by unnecessary war and violence, and on behalf of the Palestinians and the people of Israel who are also being impacted by the terrible violence there, and of course for the people around our entire planet who are watching this and grievously troubled and disturbed, or at least should be, by what we're seeing here a quarter way through the 21st century. Let's take a moment of silence, embracing others that you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and its mission to the larger world.
Hold on one second, I have props. Pooh Bear's in my way. Sorry. No. So today I was going to make up a story, but this is a situation actually where natural science is perhaps a little bit more interesting than fiction. At the second service, so sorry for my fellow favorite first service attendees, one of the children is going to help me draw a name. That's my other prop. A name of someone who has already pledged in this year's generosity campaign. So there are 28 names in here of the people who have pledged so far, and one of those lucky winners is going to receive this jar of Spokane local wildflower honey from Tate's Honey Farm. So if you want to be in next week's drawing, we're going to do 4 of these. Go ahead and get your pledge in, and I'll add your name to our little basket. And the kids every week will draw a name for us. So why are we using this jar of honey as a symbol of UUCS and the work we do here? Well, here's a few interesting facts about honey and honeybees for us to consider our similarities. Honeybees are excellent team players. They work together in colonies, and we work together here in teams. Each individual honeybee has a specific role, and each one is important in contributing to the overall well-being and success of the whole. One single honeybee working all by herself for her entire lifetime would be able to make 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. And that is what is contained in this little teeny tiny jar that's been made into a necklace. The entire lifetime's work of one single honeybee. But when all bees of the entire group, or a single colony of honeybees work together, they can make 100 of jars this size in one single season. That is definitely working together with common goals in mind. Making nourishing food, of course, is an incredibly important job in the hive. That's like Alan in the kitchen, who contributes to our kitchen work. And others, Elizabeth, thank you for your cookies she brings every week for us. There are tons of other jobs that the honeybees take care of too. Some are responsible for producing wax to build and repair the honeycomb where they live. That's like Robert Janishian or Don Willingham. That's like our operations team and our buildings and grounds team. Some bees stay home to tend the young, developing baby and children bees. That's like Stephanie and Kelsey in our religious education program. Some bees go out into the world not only to gather nectar for their own colony, but in the process of doing that, they pollinate the plants in our gardens and out in nature. And they come back to the colony to share what they know about the world. They communicate what they know with each other in a way that scientists call doing a waggle dance. Honeybees can travel up to 6 miles from their home and still get back to their very own hive, even if there are several other hives right around their own hive. And then they can share the information that they've learned out in the world to keep the bees at home safe and well fed. That's like our social justice team and Todd, nourishing us and reminding us what's going on out in the world and how we can stay safe in our minds and hearts and bodies. Honeybees also switch teams. They switch their roles. They do all the jobs in the hive. So they sometimes might be a nurse bee, and sometimes they might be a scout bee. And we switch teams all the time. That's like Luba Johnson, who's right now serving on the Board of Trustees, but won't be in a few years. But she does sing in the choir, and she also comes to Karkara every Tuesday. She's a very busy bee. Times get a little tough for honeybees at the end of the summer season. The weather changes, and they can't be outside by themselves in the cold and the wet. So what do? They stick together. They huddle together to form a cluster around the queen and each other. They shiver their wing muscles to generate heat. And if they have to move from one section of the hive to another to get more of their stored food, they do it together. So they fly and they dance and they work together during the good times and they stick together when times get a little tough. Each individual helping to keep the others healthy and warm. So be careful when you're playing outside or working in your garden and you see a single honeybee. Even though she could sting you, she doesn't want to, and she won't if you remain very calm and let her go about her work. She has incredibly important work to do. And here's the coolest thing of all, the sweetest outcome of all that work. Honey, guess what? It lasts forever. Honey has special properties that allow it to never spoil. You can put your honey in a jar, set it on a shelf, and it will last for thousands of years. And that's just what we want from our church. We want to each contribute to the lasting work of this church so it will be around for generations to come.
As we prepare for meditation, I invite you to relax, breathe deeply, and reflect on these words from Dr. Albert Schweitzer. I therefore stand and work in the world as one who aims at making men less shallow and morally better by making them think.
Thank you both so much. That was wonderful. I'm going to put your prop back down here, okay? I hope my name is in that basket. Oh, we'll make sure it is. So as you have heard and know, each year we have a generosity campaign, and at the launch of our annual generosity campaign, I give what we playfully call our Sermon on the Amount. I don't actually talk much about the amount, but it's a fun tradition and a clever nickname. This year, as we consider our financial contributions to our church, I want to remind you about its long history, some of its most important achievements, and why its presence in our lives, in our community, and the world remains at least as important today as it ever has. So let's begin by imagining what the lives, community, and world must have been like in 1887, when what was then called the Spokane Unitarian Society was founded. I've not heard a more succinct description than one given by our late minister, Reverend Dr. Bill Hauff, who Karen mentioned earlier, in his 1979 sermon entitled, "The Church After 92 Years." In it, he said, "The place was still the Wild West in the best or worst sense of the term. Gunfights erupted regularly in and around saloons on Riverside and Main Avenues. And it was not uncommon for impromptu horse races to occur on the downtown streets." The same year our church was founded, a Chinese man said to be a member of the Tong was publicly hanged at the county courthouse on its lawn for murdering a rival gang member. And the very day that Reverend Charles Went, the founder of our church, arrived in Spokane, those he was supposed to meet here were away, having joined a posse dispatched, as Hauff put it, to chase marauding Indians. I don't know if they were marauding or just existing, but nevertheless. So Went, a graduate of the Harvard Divinity School, was minister of the First Unitarian Church of Oakland, California at the time, and was on a 6-week mission trip through the Pacific Northwest in an effort to spread Unitarianism. The former Civil War drill sergeant was known for supporting women's suffrage and for his controversial sermons. Once the posse returned, he went to the Spokane Opera House, designed to seat hundreds, where only about 50 people showed up to hear what he had to say. Went later recounted the shabby, feebly lighted auditorium, the wailing cabinet organ which sustained the singing, and the tears of empty benches were not inspiring to the preacher, but they proved a challenge to my faith and enthusiasm. Still, he did his best to inspire those few who had gathered. I have rarely spoken more. Was born. Born, that is, with only 20 founding members. Their bylaw, its belief, is scientific. Its aim is to crush superstition, for heresy. That same year, they called our first minister Reverend Wanted in their pulpit. Will Locke, also a Harvard Divinity School graduate who joined the Union Army in 1862 as a chaplain, came to our church with a bounty on his head, wanted dead or alive by the entire state of Virginia for having preached a sermon favorable of abolitionist John Brown's 1859 attack on the Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry. Prior to this, he was the secretary of the Board of Education for the Freedmen Department, during which he helped open 175 schools to educate 10,000 former slaves in the Louisiana parishes. In 1865, he moved to Texas, where he also established freedmen schools, taught another 10,000 to read and write, and founded the Texas Republican Party. That's our fault. That's back when they were the Lincoln Party, the Abolitionist Party. And he became the state superintendent there of public instruction, and then a reporter for the Texas State Supreme Court. So pretty big deal here. And while here, he helped to construct our very first church building, a 275-seat meeting house at the corner of Jefferson and Sprague. In fewer than 25 years, the congregation went from 20 members meeting in that small church house to more than 800 attendees gathering at the largest theater in town. During those early years, dues were a nickel a week. But the church was mostly sustained by money raised by the Women's Alliance, who sold baked bean lunches to the downtown businessmen for 25 cents. The entire church additionally planned another $25 fundraising project each month. That's when $25 still meant something. In those days, there weren't any radios or televisions or movie houses, and only a limited amount of reading materials. So people were eager to go and hear an interesting, unique speaker if and when they could. Who better to provide such presenters than the Unitarians, who were on the forefront of modern thought? And that's why their numbers grew so rapidly, especially after the arrival of Reverend John H. Dietrich, our minister from 1911 to 1916, whom you hear me speak about a lot. It was because of his popularity that services had to be moved to the Clemmer Theater, now the Bing, which was owned by one of our church members at the time, in order to accommodate sometimes over 1,000 attendees. Dietrich, as most of you know, came to the church immediately after being convicted of heresy by the Dutch Reformed Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it was here that his brilliant mind found the freedom that he needed to begin calling himself a humanist, right? The freedom as outlined in those initial bylaws. There shall be no censure for heresy. Freedom of thought is our first priority. So he began calling himself a humanist, and to eventually become known as the father of religious humanism and a signee of the original Humanist Manifesto. Today, we can feel very proud that of the only two major philosophies to emerge in the U.S., pragmatism and humanism, the latter was born right here in the intellectually free and fertile soil of our Spokane congregation. After Dietrich's departure, M.M. Mangasarian became its interim speaker and drew, if you can imagine, even larger crowds to the Clemmer Theater. Mangasarian was a Turkish-born Princeton graduate and ordained Presbyterian before becoming the founder of the Independent Rationalist Society in Chicago in 1900. That was the original IRS. And when he came to Spokane, he was already known for his controversial 1909 book, The Truth About Jesus, in which he convincingly argues that Jesus was only a myth, that there wasn't even a historical Jesus. So despite the successes of both Dietrich and Mangasarian, to many the church felt more like a lecture club than it did a church community. A sentiment that, for better or for worse, quickly changed after their departure. The crowd immediately shrank to only a handful of the faithful few who no longer needed the Clemmer Theater and no longer had their original church building to return to. They existed, as they put it, from pillar to post, holding services in random places, sometimes in someone's home, sometimes in places called the casino, the bandbox, the little theater, Knights of Pythias Hall, and the Sun Life Building. When the Great Depression struck in 1935, they were mostly inactive with no place to meet, but they still, and this is the amazing part, they still did what they could do to collect and send clothes and shoes and bedding or whatever else they could rummage to others in need, even with no place to meet. They even held benefits to support the Social Service Bureau's Baby Milk Fund, to purchase books for the public library and furnishings for the YMCA. Even without a building, they were active in this community and in our world. Their long period of homelessness lasted from 1921 until 1937, when they began meeting at the Temple Emmanuel, which was the local Jewish community, which the local Jewish community then later generously gifted to our congregation. And that was the year that they turned 50. An anniversary remembered in the local newspaper, which defined the Unitarian Society as recognizing the right to private judgment, the sacredness of individual convictions, the moral obligation to be faithful to one's best thoughts, but requiring no assent to any theological creed as a basis of fellowship. The Unitarian Society welcomes all who desire to promote the religion of truth, righteousness, and freedom. 7 years later, in 1944, the Unitarian Society used proceeds from the sale of the temple to purchase the Patrick Welsh House on 8th Avenue, as Karen again mentioned earlier, better known as the home of Spokane's founder, James Glover, the Glover Mansion. Mrs. Welsh said the sale to a church was quite something, given all the hell we raised in it. Well, she didn't know Unitarians. We raised a lot more. Our congregation enjoyed that space for 50 years, which eventually necessitated constructing a separate sanctuary on the property's hillside. And then, having outgrown that, in 1994, they purchased this property and constructed the building we're now in here on the corner of West Wishtocks and Government Way. So that's our origin story, very succinctly put. But the more important question is, what difference has our community made in its 137-year existence? As I said from the very start, our church has done what it can to help others, including during the Great Depression, when it had almost nothing. After becoming more settled during the years since moving to the Glover Mansion, we've been able to do far more. Over the years, the Spokane Unitarian Society became the Unitarian Church of Spokane, and later the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane. Through these name changes, it has continuously stood at the forefront of progressive thought and action. We've welcomed and amplified the voices of change makers, brought historical figures like Howard Taft and Booker T. Washington and Margaret Sanger to our pulpit in the distant past, and modern speakers like Rick Steves, who advocated for marijuana legislation from our pulpit. Our leaders like Edwin Wheelock and John Dietrich and M.M. Mangasarian have often been as controversial as they were visionary, challenging societal norms and sparking crucial dialogues. Our congregation's commitment to justice and community service has led us to pioneer many critical initiatives. We were among the very first, as Karen mentioned, to protest the Vietnam War, led by the great Rudy Gilbert back in those days, who was passionately on the forefront of this issue. We've helped establish the first Planned Parenthood office in Spokane and played a key role in founding the Spokane chapter of the ACLU, the Fair Housing Center, the Human Relations Council. In the 1970s and 80s, as again Karen mentioned, our members, including Karen Dornsteele and Bob Cook, alongside Minister Bill Houff played a crucial role in exposing and halting the Hanford nuclear facility's radiation leaks, which was a monumental environmental and public health victory. More recently, our activism has led to significant legislative changes. Our efforts, like our People of Faith Support the Freedom to Marry campaign, were crucial in passing statewide marriage equality by popular vote in 2012, a first in the nation for such a bill to be passed by the people and not quietly by a legislature. And that sparked a wave of similar laws across the country until the Supreme Court itself made it legal, or recognized that it was constitutional and shouldn't be considered legal. Our advocacy also contributed to the state's moratorium on executions several years ago and its complete abolition just last year. As mentioned, we were also instrumental in raising awareness about the importance of decriminalizing marijuana in 2012. And if you watch the 2014 documentary, Evergreen, The Road to Marijuana Legislation, you will find our church is the only religious organization in it. Of course, our church's influence extends beyond legislative achievements. We've supported our local community in numerous ways, including raising thousands of dollars every year for organizations and causes in our own community, like the Center for Justice, Smart Justice, Second Harvest Food Bank, Meals on Wheels, Bike to Go, Peace Justice Action League, Spokane Alliance, NAMI, Spokane AIDS Network, Transitions, Odyssey Youth, and many, many more. Just a few years ago, when our friend from another faith, Reverend Happy Watkins, came to us and asked if we could help New Hope Baptist Church move from the converted pool hall they'd been in into a proper church building, we came up with thousands of dollars to help, just as we did when those at Morning Star Baptist needed to urgently replace their water line. And we did the same thing when asked to help lay the financial foundation to establish the West Central Community Center. We strive to be, just as we say each Sunday, a beacon of hope to those in need. As we reflect on just this bit of our church's enduring legacy, we are reminded that our small efforts today have the power to initiate widespread and lasting change. Like pebbles cast upon the sea, they ripple outward, influencing lives and shaping the future, just as those 20 souls huddled together in that drafty opera house 137 years ago. And those who came after them kept this congregation going, upholding its liberal values through good times and challenging times, so that we could be here today in this haven of sanity and tolerance. And this brings us to the final part of our question: why the world still needs us. It needs us to have the courage and fortitude to address the challenges before us today, and to assure those who come after us they will still have such a haven, and that when they come, they will understand what we have been about, what we are supposed to be about, and what we must go on doing in our lives, in our community, and in the world. And I'm very intentional about mentioning all three of these benefactors of our existence. We can't leave any of them out. We may be Unitarians, but our responsibility is triune. If you find solace and inspiration and purpose and friendship in this congregation, wonderful. You should. We are glad you do, but make no mistake, ours is not a conceited church that thinks only of itself, nor shirks our responsibilities to others, nor hides from the realities of the world by cloistering quietly inside our sanctuary walls. Those who would avoid controversy and conflict just to maintain the friendships and cohesion of our current and temporary configuration should think again. Our legacy The mandate of our founders and those who carried us forward afterward gave too much for us to sacrifice our values and purpose for such a petty prize. We are not merely the Church of Spokane. We are the Unitarian Church and always have been. Our historic commitment to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to the free and peaceful expression of ideas, to reason, science, and humanism, and to establishing a far more rational and tolerant society than the world has ever known, cannot be constrained within these walls. Beautiful, bright, and comforting as they are. Right? Look at the windows we put in. So we're reminded that there's a world outside this place. As in the past, our message and values must continue traveling pillar to post. Out there in the real world, beyond the solitude of sanctuary. That's why after I came here, I wanted to live stream our services as soon as possible so that we could begin to open our sanctuary to the world. In my 2016 sermon, Beyond Sanctuary, I talked about our need to transcend these physical walls and expand our concept of church to what we do out there every day in the larger world. Sometimes we meet here in this wonderful building, I said, but sometimes we meet in the streets, marching, gay and straight together in pride parades in solidarity with our GBLTQ friends, family, selves, and neighbors. Sometimes we meet standing outside the federal building, demonstrating for economic justice, or in front of City Hall demanding equality and justice for Latino children and their families. Sometimes we meet while hosting and attending forums on criminal justice reform or showing up in support of smart justice practices in our community. Sometimes we're in Olympia calling for an end to capital punishment in our state. Sometimes we're on Netflix in a documentary about legalizing marijuana and bringing an end to the unjust drug war. Sometimes we're giving public testimony at a hearing on the coal and oil trains coming through our community, or at a city council meeting to advocate for workers' rights. Sometimes we're chanting at a Black Lives Matters march or organizing a local rally against climate change. Sometimes we're in our workplaces, our schools, with our friends, and even stuck in heavy traffic doing our best to model our Unitarian Universalist values. In that same sermon, I talked about why we invested in our live streaming technology so that we can include members and attendees from anywhere in the world. Because we understand we are part of a global village, I said, and that our sanctuary must extend far beyond just these walls. Today, in our post-COVID lockdown existence, 70% of our attendees stream online or attend via Zoom. That's most of us. One of our board members, Dick Burkhart, lives hundreds of miles away on the west side of Washington. We have contributing and valued members in places like Charlotte, North Carolina, Woodbridge, Connecticut, and Edmonton, Alberta, to name just a few of the distant places modern technology helps bring together as one community. But it is not our technology that keeps us together. It is our shared values and our shared commitment to preserving and manifesting liberal religion in our world during one of its most challenging moments in history. Were it not for our historic congregation and its members near and far, I dare say our liberal religion, the religion of the founders of this church established 137 years ago, and those who came after them strived against difficult odds to sustain would have perished. Liberal religion would have died, just as the world needs its message of freedom and reason and tolerance and the dignity of all persons and all people more than ever. Thanks to this church on the forefront of the struggle to save Unitarianism, we can now imagine that there might still be people in 137 years from now who are inspired by what we've done during our moment in history. People who will keep our light alive because we're keeping it alive now. Even as a former Southern Baptist, I don't give altar calls. But today I want to ask all of you near and far, members and friends, to please give as generously as you can to not only help the UU Church of Spokane survive, but to thrive, so that money isn't a concern that gets in the way of our mission to be a nourishing, liberal religious home now and in the future. I must admit, the Unitarian Universalist Association's malicious attempt to force me out of the pulpit several years ago and its callous disregard for the welfare of this congregation in the process has led us to some financial difficulties for the first time in decades. We are undaunted by their efforts to erase us from the history books, and we will find a way to survive on a bare-bones budget as long as we must. But I don't believe that money will be an issue for us. Together, we can overcome this and any other barriers in the way of sustaining our community and its mission to the larger world. So I deeply thank each of you for your generosity and for your support for our congregation and for being here, helping us to make history. Thank you. Thank you.
Please stand. Join us for Love Will Guide Us. Number 131. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
I leave you today with the words of Dr. William Ellery Channing, the first president of the American Unitarian Association. It is the genius and mission of Unitarian Universalism to maintain a liberal religious attitude growing out of the Judeo-Christian heritage which holds open a door of universality with other faiths, as well as with the secular ideas of the contemporary world. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.
Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom.